And we're back for week 2 of my cane making learning project. This week I'm trying the Howlite technique. It's also referred to as the faux stone or the faux marble technique. This is my first of 3 attempts, and for this one I'm using Premo Turquoise clay, and I just rough chopped that. And then I made sure to pick apart all the pieces that were sticking together just to make sure that I could get a nice even coating on all of them. I put on a pair of gloves and used black liquid Sculpey to coat each piece in the liquid polymer clay. And once they were all coated, I smushed it all together and began rolling it into a cane shape. This technique can be pretty messy, so I just cleaned off my work surface. And then I began slicing my cane. I didn't pop this one in the freezer, but I think it still turned out okay. I laid out my slices onto my tile in a nice pattern that I liked, and I used my acrylic roller to flatten it out. As you can see, it's getting that thin black layer of liquid clay on the top, but that'll come off with some sanding later. I didn't run this slab through my pasta machine just because I didn't want to get it all dirty from the wet liquid polymer clay. But I just went ahead and cut out my pieces with my cutters. And I pulled off the excess clay. And then I used 2000 grit sandpaper to get rid of that thin black layer of liquid clay. This took a very long time, but the end result turned out so nice. This is before sanding and after. And these are the finished earrings. So I wanted to try this technique again because I was curious to see how different it would turn out if I used acrylic paint instead of liquid polymer clay. Because honestly, I was not a fan of having to sand those pieces for that long, so I really wanted to try and find an easier method. So again, I was just rough chopping these pieces all together and then just breaking them apart to make sure that they weren't sticking together. There are so many different ways that you can accomplish this technique, and beyond just choosing between liquid polymer clay and acrylic paint. So with using acrylic paint, you can coat all your pieces in the paint and then squish it all together and begin slicing. But I was nervous about my pieces breaking since acrylic paint won't bond the pieces together like liquid clay will. So instead, I let them dry completely, and then I used some clear Sculpey to bond those pieces back together. I also added a little bit of gold foil just to spice things up a little bit. I specifically chose the clear liquid Sculpey this time because I didn't want to have to sand off that thin layer of liquid clay at the end. Then I squished all my pieces together and rolled it into a cane, and then I started slicing. It looked so gorgeous when I sliced it for the first time. Just look at how happy I am. But little did I know that this was going to be an epic fail. So I finished slicing up my cane. And then I started arranging all my slices into a pattern that I liked. I tried sort of pushing them together a little bit. I used my acrylic roller to help squish them together. And I ran it through my pasta machine and it was not working. All of the pieces started falling off, as you can see, and the more I ran it through the pasta machine, the more distorted the pattern became. The black acrylic paint was sort of taking over and it was smearing all over the place, and it was just no good. The problem was that I sliced my slices too thick, so when I ran the whole slab through the pasta machine, there was just too much pressure from the machine trying to make the slab as thin as possible, and it ended up warping the pattern. I only got 2 pairs of earrings out of that entire slab. I was so mad. But I was determined to make this technique work for me, so I tried it a 3rd time. I used Premo Ultramarine, and I only used one color for this so that I could try and make it as simple as possible. I used some white acrylic paint this time and just coated it all, making sure I get every side. And after they were completely dry, I brought them back all together and added some clear liquid Sculpey again, just to make sure that all of those pieces could bond together. I squished it back into a cane shape, and then after it sat in the freezer for a few minutes, it was ready to slice. I tried not to get too excited this time because of how the last cane went, but I was really happy with how this one looked. So this time I tried slicing thinner than the last cane. I also rotated my cane every couple of slices just to make sure I wasn't changing the overall shape. Then I also learned from my mistakes from my last cane, and I used a base layer of clay to lay my slices on. The last cane, all my slab pieces were falling apart, and I think that the base layer of clay helps them really stick together. So before I started rolling it out by hand, I just laid it on some parchment paper just to make sure it didn't stick to my tile. Then I fed it through my pasta machine, starting on the thickest setting and gradually going down to a number 3. I cut my slab in half just to make it easier to feed through the pasta machine since it was getting so long. Then it was time for the fun part, which is cutting all of the fun shapes out of my slab. I really love how this cane ended up turning out. It was so much more of a success than the other 2 attempts. This is what the finished baked pieces look like. They're not quite earrings yet, but I already know that I'll love them. So out of all 3 attempts of the Howlite technique, I learned quite a few things about what I like and what I don't like. I learned that I prefer using acrylic paint and clear liquid polymer clay as opposed to using colored liquid polymer clay on its own. I really didn't like having to sand the tops of the pieces for so long after they were baked. It did turn out really nice, but logically it just didn't work for me to have to sand for that long. I also learned that I should be putting a base layer of clay to lay my slices on top of when I'm making my slabs, just to keep all of those slices stuck together when they go through the pasta machine. I also learned that I should slice my canes thinner when I'm doing that, when I'm laying them on top of a piece of clay, so that when I run it through the pasta machine, there's not too much resistance that'll make the end result warp or get distorted. Overall, I think that maybe only the second one was a true fail. The first one was okay. The end result was really nice, but the overall process wasn't that great. It was pretty frustrating. And the third attempt was amazing. I am definitely going to keep trying that technique and just trying to perfect it even more and learn some more about this technique because I think it looks really cool. So that's all for this week. Tune in next week to see me try my next cane technique. Thanks.